The story of Jesus' resurrection sounds different to me this year. Like many of you, my husband and I are riding the roller coaster of aging parents. And this winter and spring, we have been facing mortality in a new way. My mother has been living with Alzheimer's disease for 5 or 6 years now. And a few weeks ago, her illness progressed to the point that she began hospice care. And early on Palm Sunday, a week ago, my mother-in-law died at the age of 91 after a bad fall. Sometimes death comes as a release from suffering. That was true for my mother-in-law, and it will be true for my mother. But grief is always awful to go through, no matter who you're mourning for. And the death of a parent is always a blow, no matter how long you've been preparing for it. There is so much grief in the world today, for the loved ones we have lost, for the families waiting to recover their loved ones after the bridge collapse in Baltimore, for victims of terrorism and war all over the planet. This Easter, more so than years past, I am wondering, what does Jesus' resurrection mean against the reality of death? What is the hope that we are proclaiming on this day? Early in the morning of the first Easter day, there doesn't seem to be much hope for Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. They had followed Jesus, tried to live by his teaching, supported him financially, placed all their hope and trust in him. And in the last 3 days, it has all come crashing down around them. Far from winning over Jerusalem with dazzling words and cheering crowds and stunning miracles like he had done before, as these women might have expected, Jesus has been betrayed by one of his own. And it only got worse from there. Jesus was quickly convicted in a sham trial, publicly humiliated with a gruesome execution, and buried in a borrowed tomb. The women's sense of defeat and despair is overwhelming. Grief weighs them down so much they can't even raise their heads. Still, they have a job to do. The last thing they can do for Jesus, one they've done for many other people they have loved and lost: anoint his precious broken body for burial. The Marys and Salome couldn't do it right away. The shops were closed for the Sabbath, and it's only now, 3 days after Jesus' death, that they can buy the aromatic spices they need. Then they make the sad, lonely walk to the tomb. The women are talking as they go, with numb voices barely above a whisper, about the massive stone that seals the tomb and who will roll away the stone for them. Mary and Salome don't know how to do what they need to do. They just know they have to do it. So they go anyway. When they arrive at the grave in the gray light of early morning, the women find that what they need is here. The stone has already been rolled away. This is curious. The women's confusion only rises when they stoop down to step into the tomb and find a young man who's not Jesus, who's very much alive, sitting there. He's dressed in the white robe of a martyr who's been vindicated, a white robe like the one that Jesus wore when he was transfigured. Salome and the two Marys were confused before. Now they are alarmed, dumbfounded even. Who is this guy and what is going on here? Where's Jesus? Has his body been stolen? But the young man says, "Don't be alarmed. You are looking for Jesus of Nazareth. He was crucified, yes, but he is not here. He has been raised. Go, tell his disciples that he is going ahead of you to Galilee. Go home, back to where you're all from, and you will see Jesus there, just as he promised." The women panic. They run out of the tomb and far away from it. They're more afraid than ever, terrified really. And despite the young man's urging them to tell the disciples Jesus' message, they say nothing to anyone. Of course they're silent. Wouldn't you be? I would. In the turmoil of despair and confusion and grief, they can't let themselves trust the young man's words. Perhaps they fear they won't be believed. The women need time and space to pray and process their whirlwind of emotions and rest their achy, weary souls. Through all of this, Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome still have not seen the risen Jesus. In other Gospels, Jesus appears to them. They get to see him, touch him, witness him eating a piece of broiled fish. But not in this Gospel. The risen Jesus is not with the women. The risen Jesus has gone ahead of them to Galilee. I say often in sermons that Jesus is God come to be with us always. But that's not what's going on here. As Audrey West observes, Jesus going ahead of you is a different kind of promise than Jesus being with you. If that is true, she says, then death is stripped of its power. There is nothing Jesus' followers can endure, no place they can go, that Jesus isn't already there. And to see the risen Jesus, all Mary Magdalene and Mary, the mother of James, and Salome have to do is look for him. The one who promised, "Ask and it shall be given to you, seek and you shall find," is waiting in Galilee, ready to be found. And the women do find the risen Jesus. They do tell the disciples what they have seen and heard. Of course they do, because we know their story today. And the disciples believe them because they all find what they are searching for. The two Marys and Salome go to Galilee looking for the risen Jesus, and they find him. The disciples also go to Galilee looking for the risen Jesus, and they find him. Jesus has been faithful to his promise to go ahead of them. And they all find that there is no place they can go, no grave, no prison cell, no sickbed, no depth of human suffering and grief, no sight of explosive joy. There is no place they can go that Jesus isn't already there. That, dear ones, is what Jesus' resurrection means in the face of death and grief. That is where I find hope this Easter, that there is no place we can go that Jesus isn't already there. This hope doesn't erase the reality of death. I wish it did, but it doesn't. All of us will die someday. All of us will grieve for someone we love. That's the given. But it is a comfort that Jesus is already there. It is something to cling to as we walk through this valley of tears. When my mother-in-law and my mother cross over to the other side, Jesus is already there in the life to come. When I go to bury these two women I have loved, Jesus is already there at the graveside. When I do the hard work of mourning, Jesus is already there, getting ready to live again. Wherever we go, Jesus is already there. All we have to do to find him is to seek and serve him in all people. Jesus goes ahead of us to the cross, where we who follow him pay the cost of being faithful to his teaching. He goes ahead of us to the empty tomb, where we who were baptized into his death share in his resurrection. He goes ahead of us to Galilee, where we who have been raised with him proclaim the good news of God's victory over death. And when we look for Jesus in all the broken places of this world, among all the broken people of this world, we will find him because he is already there, waiting for us, just as he promised.